Hello, and welcome to The Mind of a Therapist, a podcast where I interview psychotherapists and helping professionals in what they're passionate about in order to provide you with messages of encouragement and hope. I'm your host, Andrew Earl. The Mind of a Therapist is sponsored by Psychological Counseling Services, healing hearts and transforming lives. Look into our intensive at pcsearl.com. In today's interview, I interviewed Dr. J.J. Kelly. Dr. JJ, the punk rock doc, is a licensed clinical psychologist, emotional intelligence skills training expert, and best-selling author of the Holy Shit series. Dr. JJ is also the CEO and founder of Unorthodox Inc., a punk alternative to traditional psychotherapy. Dr. Kelly and the Unorthodox live their lives with the belief that global healing is achieved by teaching people the skills to like themselves. So without further ado, here's my interview with Dr. J.J. Kelly. All right, Dr. J.J., the punk rock doc, yeah?
Yeah.
So first off, I want to hear how that name came to be, punk rock doc.
I don't know, pretty organic. I've been into punk forever. I mean, since I was like 12. And I remember when I finally got licensed as a, clinical psychologist, I was like, wow, this is like the least punk thing I've ever done in my life. I never really wanted to be an ist of any kind, but I do believe in, change from within.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise I could just go live in the middle of nowhere and have animals and shit like that. That'd be okay too, but that's not what I chose to do as far as my impact on change in the world.
Yeah.
But then when I left the profession, well, like private practice and group practice, and just started my own company and decided to do my own thing, then I was like, oh, yes, totally. Punk rock doc. Like, this is everything I've always been, and I'm going to reclaim the parts of myself that I think the profession encouraged me to make dormant.
Wow. Well, that's beautiful. And I'll admit, I don't know a ton about the punk movement. I've listened to a bit myself, but I'm curious, what drew you to punk, the punk movement? We speak a little bit to what the punk movement is to you.
Well, first of all, I think what makes something punk is that no one gets to define it for you. It can be about the music, it can be about ink, it can be about piercings, but I think overall it's about being yourself no matter who doesn't like it. And having that kind of freedom to speak freely and live freely and work and play with the kind of freedom that only comes with liking yourself coupled with speaking out and sloughing off what other people think. So it's not conformity, it's not anti-conformity, it's a non-conformity that's in the middle of that Venn diagram, and you define it for yourself based on your values. And so punk goes with dialectical behavior therapy just naturally.
And you said that you were able to reclaim some of these parts of yourself that had kind of been, there wasn't really space for within, your training program and the field of psychology. Well, if it's not too personal, would you mind speaking a bit about those parts?
No, I wouldn't mind. I've learned how to be sort of respectful publicly with this kind of thing. I just think, I was trained and worked for the better part of 20 years in Berkeley, and very liberal, known for all kinds of things. I did have a lot of freedom as far as making my own programs, even as an intern and that kind of a thing, learning from really smart veterans. It's just the profession overall has so many isms in it. Even if you're trying to get away from them, there's so much. There is racism in it. There's definitely sexism. There's ableism. There's tons of elitism, and I'm not saying that people aren't good people. That's what people misunderstand when I say things like that. It's just that very well educated people slip, I think, when they think that they're not any of those things. We all have unintentional isms within our behavior and psyche. And I think it's our job, particularly those of us that have so much privilege, that we ask ourselves the hard questions like, how am I being unintentionally racist right now? Or in general in my life as somebody white? How am I doing that? We have to ask ourselves those hard questions in order to not develop bigger blind spots over the years. And if you think you're doing everything right, quote unquote, you're never going to take a look and explore the things that might need some changing over the years or just over time or in different cultures within the United States, even. Never mind outside. So I just think that there is kind of an epidemic of everybody thinking they're right about everything and never exploring where they might not be.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. I've really resonated with Scott Miller's work of feedback informed treatment, and I think definitely with the people who consult us, but also with if you're in a supervisor role, if you're in the higher education world, it's important to be open to feedback, to be open to how you're participating in power, like you're saying, because
Yeah.
that at least all the people who have really impacted me, who I've really admired, who've been expanders for me, they all have had that flexibility and humility to look at their blind spots. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And another question I like to ask all my guests at the beginning of the podcast is, how do you view change? What do you view as necessary for someone to change? What does change look like? And when you see people make change, who are consulting you.
Oh gosh, that's such a great question. It's pretty simplistic, yet nobody asks it.
Hmm.
Kind of like tons of teens will tell me, adolescents, you're the first person that ever asked me, so what's going on at home?
Hmm.
Like, how is that possible?
Yeah. Wow.
But, we're in the business of change. So, yeah, why isn't that question asked more often? Way to go. Nice
Hmm.
question. So, how do I answer that succinctly? I think, it's so tricky because, what do I consider change? And if am I attached to outcome, which means I'm attached to being right. If somebody isn't getting better, quote unquote, and I don't have the ego strength to be like, oh, I'm failing this person, or, that is, again, there's a balance there. Um, do I require their compliance so that I can mark what I perceive as change?
Hmm.
Compliance isn't necessarily change. I think it can lead to it in the beginning. In particular, you change some behaviors, you develop better habits. Okay, yeah, that can lead to real change, I think. Um, but I think it's something that I feel when I'm with somebody. Like I watch a sparkle come back into a kid's eyes. They've
Wow.
had like the dead shark eyes the whole time. They'd come in and they're just like, they've been to a bunch of shrinks, and lots of them have been inpatients, and their soul's fucked up. Their spirit is just like, like mummified or something. And and as that twinkle comes back, and as we laugh a little more, and they tell me some of like the unique to them weird shit about them. I think that's the best stuff. And they have
Yeah.
to be careful, right? Because I'm one of many professionals that they've seen. They notice automatically that I'm different, but they don't trust it. They think it's like another adult trying to be cool or some shit, and it's not authentic. And I think adolescents in particular have such a great radar for bullshit,
Yeah.
which I like.
Yeah.
And so if we can get to the real with each other quicker, and I'm consistent in my differentness, so I think that they trust that. And I think, being all me sort of is an invitation for them to bring all of them. And trust just happens pretty quickly, but, they got to make a decision to take a risk.
Mm.
And when they do, I mean, I'm such a sucker for courage. I think courage is in such short supply in the world. So when I see it, I'm just like, oh, yeah, you know? Like, that took guts to say right there, especially to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on. Let's disagree. I'm not attached to being right. I'm just throwing everything I know at the wall with you to see what sticks. If it doesn't resonate in you,
Mm.
throw it away. I can have a lot of information inside me. Not all of it is going to be useful to you. We have to work together in that way.
Yeah.
Think, they get happier, and it's super noticeable. And then people in their lives start, in an unsolicited way, they start making comments. Wow, you seem like really happy lately. Like, then
Mm.
then it's like, oh, it's not just JJ's who like loves me or is getting paid to help me or whatever they initially have a defense around. Um, then they're friends or something. They're not. Why would they say it if it wasn't true? I say that too. Why would I say it if it wasn't true? If I think you're messing up, I'm going to jump on that. So take the compliment while.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. So I'm hearing this trusting relationship, and who are we as experts, as therapists, right, to label what changes for someone else? That's someone else's own process and journey, but there's this sparkle or soul or maybe this connection with themselves. I was also hearing this courage to share hard parts of life, and in doing that there's more of a connection with self and happiness. On your website, I was reading that one of your aims is to support people in loving themselves and in liking themselves, and how this like not love, I
I
think.
say
Yeah.
like just because
Uh-huh.
it's thrown around so much, particularly here in the Bay Area, that like spiritual materialism
Mm.
stuff, I'm not down with.
Yeah.
If you have a positive regard for yourself, you like yourself, flaws and all, you're
Mm.
probably going to act right.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's going to create more joy.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I wanted to ask you is we're going into the school year. For I remember when I was an adolescent and I was starting school, I'd get pretty anxious in the first week, especially for someone who's going into high school.
Mhm.
Maybe there's been a recent transition and they've moved to a different school, a different state. That can be a challenging time for a younger person. Would you say a bit to speak to parents of these kids who are starting school, who might be anxious, who may have some fear about, like, what message you'd give to parents on how to be there for their kids and support their kids as they make the transition back into school?
Well, I think just the knowledge that the way, first of all, they don't know they're afraid, or they're trying to hide it in order to cope. So the parents might not register it as fear because they're being such little assholes. Like, the way that fear manifests is in pissiness and complaining and acting out. So it may look like anger, and it might be some irritation too, legit. But in general, what I believe clinically is that people that don't have the skills to manage their fear effectively they project that fear out in the form of criticism. It's like a self-medicating, controlling thing, right? Like,
Mm,
"You're the problem, you're the problem, this is a problem, damn it, he cut me off," whatever. Like, that's a fear response, and it's not being effectively managed. So and then they think the problem is actually the thing they're pointing at instead of walking it back. Shrinks do this a ton too.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like,
Uh,
Berkeley's one big undiagnosed anxiety disorder. Like, everybody's right about everything.
yeah.
You're always the asshole. Like, I mean, that's ineffectively managed fear. And
Mm,
if parents know, just to know that can de-escalate something that's really going to blow up, probably, particularly in the mornings when everybody's tired and trying to get their shit together, the backpacks, the lunches, and they're tired, so their defenses are down, their brains aren't on yet. School starts so damn early. Not everybody operates like that,
sure,
including parents.
sure, sure.
So if everybody can just, like, maybe there's a ritual in the family of naming emotions. I feel like you're being an asshole is not an emotion. That's a thought. It's a judgment. I feel mad when you say this to me. I feel confused right now about what, and confused is one of those that's sort of on the fence. But naming of emotions in order to validate the emotion, which is going to bring it down closer to baseline a little bit,
Mm,
so that everybody can just operate humming a little quieter,
yeah,
a little softer, getting a little closer to, because those spikes off baseline happen so quickly, the emotional activation, and then it's back and forth, and they're just passing that shit baton back and forth, and it doesn't go anywhere. Well, who's responsible for that? I hold the teens responsible because that's who I'm working with. But in that kind of situation, overall, whose responsibility is it? It's the parents. They're the adult. So if you know that them being pissy is fear, and it's probably predictably going to be higher at the beginning of the year, then you can say calmly, that is not an acceptable way to speak to me. I'm
yeah,
not saying don't enforce consequences. I'm big on consequences. I just don't want reactive teen leading to reactive adult. Somebody's got to calm the shit down.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, I think that goes for adults too, like you're saying, that fear, the pain, I'm getting into internal family systems recently. So the exiled parts of us, that have experienced trauma and pain, they'll definitely, our protector parts, that criticism, will definitely come out as a parent at times, and realizing when that's happened, and then doing, Dick Schwartz talks about a U-turn, focusing, okay, well, what's coming up for me right now, and getting to that place where you're regulated, so
Right.
that you then can be in that regulated space to hold space for this young person who's dealing with a lot, and hold space for that fear that they may be
Well, you're also
experiencing.
modeling a
Yeah.
decent way to behave.
Yeah. Yeah.
Behaving according to the individual and the family's actual values. So you're not being a dick and then causing yourself shame.
Yeah.
Parents are already hovering, worrying about if they're fucking up their kids, or they're a bad parent, or all these worry thoughts that parents have, like, and shame about past mistakes, perceived mistakes, or whatever. So, like, let's reduce that
Mm-hmm.
by
Mm-hmm.
behaving how we want to behave. That takes a tiny bit of planning. Doesn't even take a ton of planning. Just think, okay, what's bound to happen tomorrow morning based on this morning?
Sure.
What
Sure.
do I, if I had a redo, if I had a do over, what would I do differently, if anything, today versus yesterday? A tiny bit of mindfulness,
Mm.
getting ahead of it, preventative.
Mm. That's good. And you've written a book on, for parents, on if your child is cutting. I know that self harm, suicide are major issues in our society right now, especially it seems like it's happening to people younger ages. I know that, parents are concerned about this. What I'm sure you have a lot to say on this topic, but what would you say to parents and young people around, who maybe there's been a history of self-harm, maybe they're just concerned that their child might be having thoughts of harming themselves?
Um, Boy, that's hard to break down. I guess my quick answer is read the book or listen to it. It's more fun to listen to it.
Hmm.
Because my producer let me keep in all the laughing and the
Oh,
cursing.
good.
So that's more fun. But and I have a ton to say, I have a book's worth to say about this. I think it's really scary, and I think that's valid for both parents and kids. My messaging is usually a little bit different if the parent is in front of me and the kids in front of me, obviously. Um, I think that the terror that parents feel about it makes them wish that it will never happen to their kid, and just factually, they will probably at least dabble. Very few
in
kids
in
don't do
self-harm.
any of it.
Yeah.
Yes, don't do any self-harm. And I'm not just cutting. I mean, there's all kinds of self-harm, and, punching walls and, geeking out on hours and hours of a video game. I mean, these are self-medication at least. So I think that getting real about the probability of some of these self-medicating and self-harm behaviors are going to need to be addressed with their kid.
Yeah.
So don't deny it. Just like drinking and weed, and like, come on, it's not if, it's when.
Sure.
Like,
Sure.
I wish too that it's not inevitable, but wishing doesn't make it so. So I do think that, I don't really work with the parents as much exclusively. So that's why I did the book, so that they could have what I think. And I could still have the privacy with their kid and not do the consulting where the kid thinks I'm narking.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
But I think that, don't deny the fear about it either. Just decide what you as a family want to do about things like that. And the kids are smart, they will hold the parents hostage with the cutting, where the parents won't enforce consequences because they're afraid it'll lead to cutting, which sometimes it will.
Hmm.
So they're like, they think their hands are tied because of fear. And, you can't stop parenting, in my opinion, because you think that, and it's not the same as suicide. There are far, far more self-harming behaviors happening than suicides completed.
Hmm.
So it is not an automatic. It's suicidal kids look and feel very different when you're
Yeah.
with them than
Yeah.
kids that self-harm.
What
So
would you say are those differences from your experience?
the kids who self-harm, well, the kids who self-medicate, real anxious, fidgety, agitated, um, everybody. But the kids who self-harm, particularly with cutting, there's an anger component, whether it's outward or inward, but there is rage going on, more likely than not. It's more active. The chronically suicidal kids are like just heavy,
Yeah.
heavy. I wouldn't say inactive, because they're dangerous to themselves. That still requires activity, but there's just a heaviness and a slowness about just their energy and their cadence in speaking, and these are not like certainty things either. I'm saying in general. I mean, this is a very nuanced thing I'm talking about, and it's dangerous to be wrong. So if you think your kid is suicidal, or if your kid is saying they're suicidal, even if you think that it's just a threat, you get them into the ER. and you have a doc assess them. If you even think, that's what it's there for. If you even think that that's an issue, you get them to the hospital. You don't guess.
Yeah.
That's what I do too.
Yeah.
So like if I think that there's a real danger, I'm like, okay, if you don't want me to call the cops and have them come get you from my office, then I need you to walk to it right now with me on the phone and then hand it to the attending to tell me that you're actually there. That's how serious this is.
Yeah.
And I'm not alarmist at all. So if it comes to that, they know that we got problems.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched a bit on this, but what do you see as maybe societal, familial forces that are contributing to this, rise in suicide, rise in self-harm?
I mean, is it rising or is it just being reported more? I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not even weighing in. I'm just asking the question.
Sure.
Nobody ever talked about self-harm in like the 80s. Was it not happening because nobody talked if a tree falls in the woods? You know what I mean? Like nobody talked about child abuse either. Were kids not getting beaten? No.
That's a good point.
I don't know. But what I think is the general reason it's happening in like at all is nobody has any emotional intelligence skills. I mean, the one decent thing, productive thing that's come from COVID is at least now people know they don't have any. Like we professionals have known people don't have any, and it's our job to teach that to them, whatever, but they got to come in. Now they're coming in droves, which is great because awareness is up. My problem from before that I was talking about still exists. They're coming in droves to a very imperfect system of mental health as it is today, in my opinion, full of isms that we're trying to get rid of in the world, but still exist in this like almost secretive, closed environment. It still is the doctor worship. You're like, oh, the doctor said to do this, so I automatically have to do it. Like what? Higher education is filled with dumb people that have paid for a degree also.
Sure.
Just because you have a doctorate doesn't actually make you smart or caring. It makes you come from a place where you have the money to go to higher education. So I think the one side is still great. People are like, holy shit, I'm going to kill my family if we have another wave of COVID. Okay, I got to get some help. Okay, yes, great. I don't know that years of therapy I've watched for 20 years now. Like years, and I've seen people for years too when I was in group and private practice, and I liked doing that work and I watched them grow. They had the means. Okay, but what about when people don't have that kind of money? And I don't know how I feel about taking $3,000 a month from a parent for years. That's why I started the company, because I'll do the 8 weeks of teaching them the emotional intelligence skills, and then they can go. And use their skills based on their values. The whole world needs that.
Yeah.
We need that, not necessarily therapy.
Sure. Will you speak a bit more about this company you created and the services, the courses you provide? I looked a bit online, but I'd be curious to hear more about the development of them.
It's pretty simple, despite the fact that dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, still seems pretty much of a mystery to people. I think that is because it's so experiential. It's not something you just look up on Google and then you get it.
Sure.
And plus it's half Thich Nhat Hanh's Miracle of Mindfulness. So the Buddhist shit has been around for thousands of years. Here we are, Americans, the adolescents of the world. We don't get that. That shit is so deep.
Yeah.
Wow. So So I taught dialectical behavior therapy since like what, '04 or something. I taught classes. and and it's so awesome because it's so versatile, because it's based on your values. We don't have to agree for me to teach you and for you to know you're respected and cared about. We can completely disagree,
Mm.
particularly around politics. That's gotten so heated. It's not like I never had any clients that differed starkly from me politically. Does that mean I can't love them? I can't help them? No, absolutely not. More people need to know that in
Yeah,
our country.
absolutely.
However, I basically boiled it down to 8 weeks of teaching the DBT skills. They have to do the homeworks every week so that they're practicing new behaviors, right? And then around week 3, when I teach willfulness, we fight. We get in a horn lock, which I think is great that they have the guts to do that so early. And then, of course, I'm like, come on, like we work it out and they see where I'm going with it, that I'm not just trying to be right or power over them. And we get through that conflict, and then they start getting their own data. They're trying out the skills and they're collecting their own efficacy points,
Hmm.
which are courage points, which are self-confidence points, self-esteem points. And then it's like, oh, it's not just her talking. This really does work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know. I
Yeah.
remember that feeling to this day. I had been teaching it for like 2 years before I was like, okay, why am I avoiding this phone call with this person right now? A very volatile person, so valid. And I was like, oh, I'm scared. And then I could feel the fear returning to baseline, just going down, down, down. I was like, oh, this shit really works.
Yeah.
But that's the experiential like light bulb moment.
Yeah.
And as much as somebody can try and pound something like that into you, nobody likes to be strong armed. You want to figure it out for yourself. And so infrequently do shrinks do that. That they'll withhold. Oh, well, what do you think? Well, I fucking asked you what you think. Like you think that I'm gonna mimic you so hard. I don't have an individual personality that you're going to see your answer and I'm immediately going to copy that. How insulting is that?
Hmm.
And sometimes that happens, particularly with kids, and I'm a decent role model, so if they do emulate some things at first, probably not a bad idea. But I'll be like, I'll answer that question. I will straight up answer that question. I just want to hear your answer first.
Hmm.
And then I do answer the question and
Yeah.
reminding them that we don't have to agree on that. That withholding thing isn't the same as letting them have their own opinion. There's a like glasses at the end of the nose kind of writing notes, like power play that goes on that nobody likes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's such a dick move to do with power. I hated it when I went, and I never wanted to be that for other people. I wanted to be the shrink I wish I had at 14.
Hmm. And so I'm hearing that therapist is a therapist who kind of steps out of that expert role and is more collaborative, while is very genuine, gives these tools, but doesn't force the tools or force anything to fit. Allows that person to try out these different DBT skills and tools and see if it works for them, if it sticks, if it doesn't, and at the core of it, though, I'm hearing acceptance and a listening to that person.
Acceptance as a vehicle to change. And I
Yeah.
agree with every word you said, except
Hmm.
steps out of the role of expert.
Oh.
I straight up say, I am an expert
Hmm.
at teaching you emotional intelligence skills.
Hmm.
I'm not the expert on you, though. You
Yeah.
are.
Hmm.
That's why we got to work together.
I
But
like
I
that.
own the authority, and I don't let them like speak to me in ways that they often speak to their parents, or it's based on mutual respect. I own the authority. I just think there's a tipping point. I think owning the authority is like makes them think they're respected and that they're emotionally safe, even though I don't like the usage of that word. But they are, they're not going to get attacked for having their own opinion or disagreeing with me or whatever. But I'm still going to call them on what I perceive as their bullshit. And I'm not always right, but it is my job if I think that it's happening to call it out.
Yeah, that's good.
But when you can be like, no, actually, this is, and I'm like, oh my God, I misunderstood. I totally get it now. That was not bullshit. I beg your pardon. I was wrong.
Yeah.
I just had that happen the other day. And the kid was like, thank you. I'm like, no sweat. I was way off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, but that's important.
Yeah. Well, my grandpa and my father are actually both marriage and family therapists, and my grandpa, he's been practicing I think 5 decades. I always forget, a long time. He's got a bullshit button in his office. You have it too.
Woo, woo. Yeah, it's like a big red button.
Yep. So you two, I think would get along in that.
I think we
realm.
would, and if he drinks whiskey, we definitely would.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. I'm curious if you talked about one tool is naming our feelings, the power of slowing down. Okay, what am I feeling? Could you give our listeners like a skill, a DBT skill, maybe that they could try out?
Yeah. If people just did that, separated feelings from thoughts and named feelings, man, the world would be a different place, a better place.
Yeah.
I have a feelings sheet that's straight out of the DBT workbook. It's just listed emotion words. If you do the wheel, like if you just Google the wheel, which people are doing now, which again is great, except that the wheels out there are filled with thoughts that are not emotions. Interested is not an emotion.
Yeah.
And abandoned is overused. I'm pretty sure only a kid can be abandoned by their parent. Grown people saying, "Oh, you're abandoning me," is like, what the hell? There's a handing of power. Safe. The advanced students don't even dare say that around me. They know I'm just like, oh, the world's not safe, millennials. Like, it's about building resilience, like not requiring that the world never says anything that offends you. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no problem. That's a good point.
I just, like, of course I want you to be safe. I don't want you to like walk in an alley at night, but that's not what they mean.
Sure.
And of course I'm not pro hate speech or like anti-gay, any of that. Yet I think that the realistic thing is to look at the cards that you're holding and play them instead of wishing for different cards. Yes, do the social justice work. Yes, I do think we all have a responsibility to do that. And until we've created a better world with that, we got to play the cards we got.
Yeah.
And I think that becomes more about advocating for self, being assertive, saying no, standing up and saying, I'm not going to hang out with you if you speak like that. Like, you don't have to require that the other person changes. Nobody can change other people, by the way. Don't you think I would have figured that out by now if it could be done? So we can't attach to other people changing. We have to decide what we want to do with our daily life and what matches our values and behave accordingly. So naming of emotions, true emotions, not thoughts. The feelings sheet is on my website, drjjkelly.com. I'm always being told to say that more when I'm in these interviews. Okay, geez, you forgot again. Okay, but I'm in it. I'm in the flow. Can't be plugging things. So, but it's easy. You could just download the sheet and I'm emailing the sheet everywhere and people are like, making it more colorful or whatever. But naming your emotions, and a lot of times the ones that are sneaky, like shame, we hide out from shame. And what do we do with shame? We turn it into anger, defensive anger. It's the other person's, so like being honest about what you're actually feeling. And, it sounds like a simple thing to go to your sheet and look for the emotions, but no, people do not have an emotions vocabulary that is vast in any way. Most people have a very primitive vocabulary, all down to like good and bad. How do you feel good? Yeah, good is not an emotion. Nobody that has worked with me, even for the beginner course, ever ends that 8 weeks saying good or bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
No way. That's when the button thing.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be button. I said the taboo, that game Taboo.
Uh-huh.
No. Good tells me nothing except maybe we're in the camp of the positive emotions. That can mean a lot of things. So, yeah, get a vocabulary, but why? Because if you're able to articulate with specificity what you are experiencing, you're going to be more grounded in your experience. You're going to be able to validate it. It is emotional intelligence. The ownership of our own experience, it educates us so that it doesn't overtake us. We can name it, and then it puts it just a little bit of distance between the experience and the word. Now we can make a decision from our values what we want to do about it. There's a mindfulness piece to it. It slows everything down just to go find the word, even if you're flipping through, I don't know what it is. And sometimes people are all worked up and I'm like, that's not an emotion. Well, that's not an emotion. I know I'm pissing you off, yet you're not saying emotions. We have to do this. And even in the flipping around, they might get more pissed off, but eventually when they get to starting to name it and like it's on for them and they're choosing it, that validation starts chilling them out.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean the thing they're pissed at goes away. It just means they can get to a place where they can think about it rationally and we can talk about it without them being through the roof where nothing productive gets done.
Yeah, absolutely. In putting language to our experience, especially our emotional experience, allows us to get that space and get into that ventral state of calm and that's where the work can be done and there can be change. So we're right at the end of the interview here. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I love the humor. I think I've laughed as much in this interview as in any, so love that. Before I ask you the last question, where you mentioned your website, where else would you direct folks? And I'll link this all in the show notes.
Well, with COVID, we loaded up Instagram. I'm Gen X, so I was dragging my feet on the social media thing. I finally caved. And the part I like about it is there's so much free content on my Instagram and everything's Dr. JJ Kelly. YouTube, Instagram, everything's Dr. JJ Kelly, so you can find it. But there are clips from our interview will go up, and people can get the points and the sound bites and just like concepts for free on Instagram. And I think it's an easy way for them to get what, it would take a while in therapy for someone to talk to a newbie like this.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean like a newbie can't grasp it. Yeah. It just means that the shrink thinks they're not ready. Well, maybe they can go to my Instagram and just decide if they're ready or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. And I love, part of my goal with this podcast was to give voices like yours out into the world, in the podcast world in particular. So I'm so grateful for the work you're doing. I've looked at your website. Yeah, please go visit it. And you've got courses as well
Yep.
on there, and so people can learn more about those.
I
Mhm.
finally caved, and I'm going to do a once a month parenting Zoom for like a Patreon subscription or something.
Oh, nice.
Once a month. So many parents have been asking me. I'm just going to have it be like a Q&A.
Great.
They have to have read the book, though, because they
Okay.
need to know how I present, so not everybody gets butt hurt, and they can't be too fragile when they come on. I don't have time for that. If you want the answers and you can take it, fine, come on the call.
Yeah.
But that, I think, that is probably where I'm moving, is some of the, for people that can't afford
Yeah.
everything that's out there. There has
Absolutely.
to be a way for people without as much in the resource department, money, to be able to get happy. It's not just for people with money. That's bullshit. It
Yeah.
goes against everything I'm about, you know?
Absolutely. Well, the last question I like to ask our guests is, what's a message of hope you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Well, I said recently, what caught on is happy people act right. I think there is a natural, when you like yourself and you have this balanced wholeness that creates joy, and you've had it for a while, what I experience for me, but what I see in the people that I work with is there becomes a natural inclination to then give. Like, the heart overflows, the cup runneth over, or whatever. There is a natural inclination towards service and generosity.
Wow.
I have chills.
Yeah,
from that.
that's beautiful.
I'm like this close to crying.
No.
This kind of thing is what it's all about, I think.
Yeah.
Imagine the whole world like that. No kids would be starving. No one would be hoarding wealth. Like, there wouldn't be racism. It would naturally go extinct. It wouldn't even occur to us anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
All we want to do is help and be happy and play.
Yeah.
Not that work isn't that. Service and effort, that's a part of it, of course. We all want to work and contribute to society, but that's woven in too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
that's what I think. People think all kinds of things when I say stuff like that, but I don't give a fuck, because that is true.
Yeah.
And people can feel the truth when they're in the presence of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. JJ, for taking the time today, and love to have you back at some point. If you ever want to come and talk again, love to have you as a guest again. So thank you.
Anytime. Thanks for letting me talk.
Please press the subscribe button, as well as rating and reviewing our podcast. This helps others connect with what you've been hearing. If you have any questions, please contact us at themindofatherapist@gmail.com. These questions will be kept anonymous. I want to thank Eric Price for the wonderful music you hear in this podcast. Additionally, this podcast was created to provide accurate and authoritative information on the subject matter. Although we are interviewing licensed therapists, they are not your therapists. This podcast is not intended to serve as direct medical advice and should not be used as a substitute for direct professional help. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, guests, or PCS are rendering legal, clinical, or other professional information. If you need a professional, we encourage you to find one. Visit Psychology Today to connect with a licensed clinician near you.